So, I'm not entirely sure where this is going, to be honest. Let me just navigate out this parking spot first, though. Is there something behind me? No, there's not something behind me. So, typically it's the hardest part of my fucking drive. Just getting out of the car park. Not because the car park's particularly difficult, I'm just not the best driver when it comes to checking my mirrors and stuff like that. I mean, maybe it is quite a tight car park. So we're on our way right now to pick up Sibel from her singing lesson. She does it not far from Al-Sakal, at a place which on the maps is called the National Ballet Studio. And I think since I've known her, this is the third different place that she's been singing lessons. And honestly, I'm so proud of the way that she commits to furthering, you know, herself and her own creative endeavours, to be honest. Let me just get across the road. Okay, there we go. So we're on the road. I mean, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by I'm impressed by how she's committed herself? Because committing yourself to what you enjoy, is it hard? Or is it hard when you don't enjoy it? Because there are things that I enjoy, but the act of getting myself in that process where you're actually doing, there's a bit where you have to almost warm up. It's like when you go for a run. Do you warm up before a run? I say the majority of people I know who just run for enjoyment don't bother warming up, even though they know it's the best way to start. Activations and whatnot. Because apparently there's kind of like conflicting evidence as to how much stretching will help a runner prepare for what they're going to do. But activations, committing to a few strides to warm up the neuromuscular, get those adaptations in. I was listening to a guy called Steve Magnus who talks about the fact that if you are lengthening the muscle and making it more, I've forgotten what word he uses, is it supple or flexible? But the act of doing that, whatever that does, like whatever yoga does, it actually is to the detriment of one's running economy. Because actually as runners, we're not supposed to be, you're supposed to get as much kind of bounce from your joints, from your ligaments as possible. And so lengthening that muscle or stretching it actually reduces running economy. And this is just a really roundabout way of saying, you know, actually getting into something in the best way possible, being in the right frame of mind when what you're doing is purely enjoyment and you're not being forced to do it. I think it could sometimes be hard to take that first step. I found that when I lived in London for 4 years. I was trying to be an author. Well, in the end, I was an author. I got 3 child's books published. And I had to come up with little tricks or little strategies to get into it in the first place. So one of the things I used to do was, and in fact, I think it's common to a lot of people these days, is that if you wake up and your first thought is social media, or your first thought is television, any sort of kind of passive scrolling, dopamine hits, getting caught on a narrative that you can't walk away from, if I got involved in that, it would kind of block my thought process. I find it really hard to switch off and then go to the desk and start writing. And so I'd ban myself from any writing as soon as I woke up. Sorry, from any watching, from any social media as soon as I woke up. And instead, I'd brew coffee and I'd write. Well, I guess I was journaling, but I didn't call it journaling at the time. At the time, I just saw it as kind of my first expressions of the morning, getting some thoughts onto paper, thinking about my day, the day before, things that I'd found interesting. And then as soon as my coffee was brewed, I'd have one cigarette on the balcony, clear my mind a little bit, and then I would move onto my desk and I'd start writing. And I would work in 30-minute chunks, so I'd set a 30-minute timer on my phone. And it did not matter what I did, so long as in that 30 minutes, or rather, it mattered what I did, because I did not allow myself to do anything but write. I guess the more accurate thing to say is it didn't matter how much I wrote. If I wrote for 5 minutes of the 30, or 7 minutes of the 30, or 25 minutes of the 30, the whole point was to use that 30 minutes to try and find a flow. I've had discussions about what mindfulness is. My experience of mindfulness is that it was always so much more about, when I felt I was in a flow, I didn't feel like I was being mindful, I felt like I was being mindless. But maybe we're just using different words to describe that same feeling of being really locked into one thing in particular. As soon as I felt locked in, I was typically pretty happy. Right, I don't know where I'm driving to actually, so let me just